Great. Well, it's wonderful to join the summit and be a part of this initial offering. It's so fantastic to support this different way of orienting towards the work of developing consciousness and in a much more engaged response across the board. What we've been doing in so many ways, there's been so much good work over the decades of pro-environment movement. But there's also, I think, often we sense something amiss about that. And I think Renee and the team that she's assembled and Project Inside Out are taking an approach that really addresses some of those core pitfalls, and I think will enable a whole new way of us actually talking with ourselves and each other about this. So what I'm going to do here in the short time that I have is to really look at that question of how it is we speak to ourselves about this. In a way, it's a microcosm, an approach to having that same kind of principled conversation, starting with attunement and ending up with equipping and sustaining, but in a private way, just with ourselves. And so I've called this Mindful in the Middle Seat. And it's built on the Grounding in Faith initiative that One Earth Sangha and Green Faith and Project Inside Out did together last year. And for me, it was an opportunity to develop a practice that focused specifically on the act of flying and do a kind of self-intervention, a private microcosm, as I was saying, of a kind of self-guided conversation. Because the reality is that many of us feel quite ambivalent about flying. We see wildfires and we see hurricanes and we know about sea level rise and the loss of ice globally, and yet we want to travel. So these are connected, but very indirectly. There are many dots to connect from my business or pleasure trip to the atmosphere. It's different over space and time. It translates from the individual to the collective. Even if you don't fly, through driving, the products that we buy, the way that we interact with the material world, most of us here participate in and contribute through our actions to climate crisis to some degree. And so there is that dilemma in taking the single flight. We know that that something very unwanted, very difficult is underway, destroying the natural world and the living earth community. So we have that anxiety, and then we have the ambivalence, the professional expectations. In the case of flying, family connections, pleasure, cultural connections, status, even some sense of ego. It feels great. I'm important. I fly. And then there's the material and the social impact. The material impact, this incremental contribution to climate breakdown. As small as it is, it's incremental contribution. And then there's the social contribution. Normalizing that choice, going with the flow, not challenging, and actually incrementally strengthening the expectations, signaling it's okay to fly through our embodied action. It's kind of like not wearing a mask. If we know that masks that are necessary to protect life, but here we are engaging in it. And so of course we feel ambivalent about it. Of course there's that internal dilemma. And then there's the aspiration. We want another way. Can there be another way to do this? The common response for most of us is some form of disconnect. From denial, okay, most of us here are not denying climate change. And in fact, most of the US population and beyond is not denying climate change anymore. But there can be a kind of soft denial. It's just one flight, I'm just one person. Or maybe it's distraction that we go to. I'm going to get some work done. I'm not going to think about this. I'm just going to keep going. A dislocation, climate change, terrible problem. Someone should really solve that. Or maybe there's entitlement. I'm important enough. I deserve this. Maybe there's anger. I'm angry at the fossil fuel companies. I'm angry at this situation. Maybe it goes a different way into shame or despair. In a certain way, I want to invite us to consider that all of those are some form of disconnect. A way, even shame and despair, even anger, a way of avoiding the raw, shaky, uncertain experience of what's happening. This is painful. There are ramifications of sitting on that flight, not just for the world, but for this heart. That it is painful is also, of course, evidence of our belonging, of our interdependence. Our bodies and hearts and minds are bound to this world, and it would not hurt if it were not so. So what's the alternative? Wakeful presence, compassionate inquiry, being with, and in some ways widening the scope beyond those reactive impulses to disconnect. We can support ourselves and each other in remaining present and looking closely. Waking up, inviting awareness, and this potentially new understanding. So this is what I'm calling the middle seat meditation. For those who know anything about the Buddhist tradition, a little play on the middle way. I saw on a travel website, the headline was, "Whoever selects the middle seat through choice." Well, that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to choose that uncomfortable middle seat on purpose. So what I want to suggest to you is the next time that you're making the reservation and then maybe sitting in that seat, taking your seat on the plane, or engaging in any, if you've renounced flying, and maybe you're engaging in some behavior that causes harm for the living earth community. To settle in that seat and pause and remain without judgment, not needing to escape, to tolerate the want to escape that uncertain place. Instead of opening up the laptop and getting to work or opening up the book, open this heart, open this mind, open this body to what's happening, to pause and remain. The possibility is to sit there with a compassionate inquiry. What is happening? How am I feeling? To have a conversation even with the earth, with the living earth community, with your aspirations. Here I am. This is happening. It's a shaky, vulnerable edge. I saw Dan Siegel's presentation, The Wheel of Awareness, and he talked about the necessity of being not just in our minds and our hearts, but also in the body, very much in the body. I am connected to life. I am part of this life. And I feel the reality, the incremental impact of what is happening here, the vulnerability of that. The truth of my interbeing. We're welcoming and we're attuning. We're listening then for what comes up. Now, when I've done this for myself and when I've talked to others about it, what kind of things come up? Guilt, longing for an alternative, excitement, anticipation for the trip to come, caring for the earth and the living earth community. Knowing that climate crisis is underway, worried for the loss, knowing my privilege in sitting in this seat, perhaps a loneliness in the consciousness, in feeling conscious of it. Everybody else here is just getting to work and doing their plain things, and I'm just sitting here being with this. It's kind of lonely. I deserve this. I don't deserve this. Where's my phone? I want to get back to work. I'm confused. I'm sad. Is this heart somehow divided against itself? So we're welcoming the full catastrophe. Well, we're welcoming all the complexity and making room for the wholeness of the experience. And if it is difficult, that can be okay. We can find that we can tolerate it and then see what else is here. If it feels too lonely and too hard, oftentimes I'll bring in community, knowing that there are so many others who feel this way, who struggle with flying, consciously or unconsciously. Maybe it's out of greed and not caring, but maybe not. As Renee Lertzman has said, there's the myth of apathy. So there's a wanting for responsibility, and I'm not alone in that. So it's not just what I'm confronting here, but what we're confronting here, what we're all faced with this dilemma. I can pick up on my sense of longing. That sense of longing is one that really leads onward. It's not a fantasy about it all going away, but to follow that want is often leads to someplace beautiful. It can feel like a razor's edge, so sharp to sit on that and not fall into this reactive place of shame or disconnection or hatred. But what I found is that gets smoother and smoother and eventually becomes worn down, and I can be held in that uncertainty. As opposed to the razor's edge, it's a place I can rest. Our tendency is to tune out, to turn away, but the invitation here is to tune in. And really, we're all in a middle seat here. We see the impact, we see that we're contributing to climate crisis, and we wonder from where will change come. It hurts to feel that separation. But what is possible when we hang out with it and feel our connectedness? What happens when we're present for the taking? We're not plants. We don't make our own energy. We get energy from plants, from other animals to move. We respirate. It's the way life is, this life is. So the possibility that can emerge, I just want to offer a few alternatives, which is that we look at the possibility of having a reciprocal relationship, that there can be this recognition, respect for the other who is impacted, even the seeking of consent in a spiritual way, the aspiration to repair, to restore, perhaps to dedicate this flight, to say, may it serve the living earth community and all that I love. I know there's a sacrifice here. As I see the buck that I want to feed my family, I let the arrow fly, but I have acknowledged the life that is being taken. And in a spiritual sensibility, we can recognize the sacredness, to honor the sacrifice, to make sacred. So those are possibilities to not only reduce and renounce flying, but or any kind of harm that is done, but to be in reciprocal relationship with the harmed and to let it be acknowledged and respected. So those are inside out kind of emergences that will be everybody here will have a different sensibility about that perhaps. But these are the authentic, our natural ways of being in connection with the earth and the living earth community that can come out of having this private internal conversation that follows this same model. So that's what I wanted to offer, is the possibility of our supporting ourselves and each other in reducing harm, even renouncing certain behaviors, but also awakening the act of taking and seeing that that's part of how life operates, and we can have a reciprocal, repairing, restorative relationship when we inevitably take. Thank you for giving me some time to share that. And I welcome an exploration now, if there's time. Renee, do we need to keep moving, or we can do a short word cloud exercise?
We can do a word cloud.
So yeah, the invitation is to with as Pedro, I think will share. I'm going to stop my screen share, Pedro. That you share just what are some possibilities of that you can imagine with an engaged relationship, an awakened connection to the act of taking, maybe especially in that middle seat in flying. What's possible as an alternative to the normal way of interacting with that, which is that we disconnect and tune out. So maybe just share one or two words in the word cloud of what can come up for you. Giving back, complexity, motivation, self-discovery, nice. Privileged, yep. Discomfort, softening, ooh, love that. Conflict, yep. Compassion, nice. I'm going to change my screen here so I can see all of these. Compassion getting even bigger, nice. There can be a nervousness. If I feel compassion, will I feel as motivated for change? It's a good question. Check it out. Often what happens is that when we feel compassion, instead of our motivation for change dampening, it's actually freer and less reactive and more energized, but in a way, a more sustainable way. Gratitude, giving, listening, wonderful. Purpose, creativity. Wow, you guys are great. Oh, this is beautiful. So it's like the full catastrophe, like let it all be welcome and explore it with interest. Listen deeply to yourself as you would those you are guiding. Can you guide yourself into this and see what natural wisdom emerges? Mourning, yes. Sorry, yeah. Regret, wish there was a different way. Heart, anxiety, guilty, responsibility, capacity. Oh, so good. We could go on forever, right, Renee? Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your words. I know it's like only one word, hard to encapsulate all that complexity in one word, but really great to do this exercise with you. Thank you.